Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a new episode of our monthly podcast. That is right.
Spirit box session.
I am your host and the host of this YouTube channel, Sophia. For those of you who don't know, I am a film major graduate and I studied film. Who would have guessed? And I specialized in extremism and international cinema.
Awesome. And I am Emily, and I am a PhD student with background in criminology and sociology and psychology and a little bit of forensic science in there. And we are here to talk about more horror movies. And this one is one that Sophia recommended, and she is so excited to talk about, which is great. And I have some thoughts as well.
Okay, so when we started this channel, we said we were gonna go back and forth and pick movies, and I realized that this is actually my second week in a row picking a movie, so my bad. I was just really excited about this one.
All good. Okay, so maybe we should tell the folks what movie we've picked. So it's À l'intérieur. It's a French extremist horror movie, and since this is Sophia's pick, I'll let her explain it. The plus side, if you haven't seen the movie, highly recommend to go watch it either before you continue or afterwards. It is a very short watch, so not a huge time commitment.
No. I'm especially excited about this one. Obviously, if you just heard our intro, my major, my focus, my final thesis was on extremism film. So this is the first time that I actually get to talk about extremism film. The extremist genre is my favorite genre out of all of film. And this is saying something. Specifically, French New Wave extremism. Let me tell you guys something. I hate French film. I hate French film so much. I can't stand it.
And arguably, you also hate French culture so much.
There's just something about it. But then when my prof said, get a load of this one, and I'll get into it later, but he put on the very first French extremism film that I saw, and I swear to God, I was glued. I was like, what is this? The French? Doing something right here, guys. Anyway, so like a genius that I am, I did not write a actual synopsis, so we're gonna go off memory. Is her name Sarah or Anna?
Oh gosh, I didn't even write that down. I have no idea.
I'm pretty sure her name is Sarah. One second.
Yeah,
Sarah. Okay, Sarah. Okay, perfect. Okay, so film starts off with this lady named Sarah, and you see that she is pregnant, and she is in a doctor's office, and she's kind of refusing help from anybody. Baby's fine. She goes home, and she's home alone. That's when she gets a mysterious knock on the door, and her name is the femme, the female. She doesn't actually have a name.
La femme.
Is trying to get into Sarah's apartment. And you don't actually know why she's doing this, but she is doing this. And she eventually finds her way in. And basically the femme is trying to murder Sarah and take the baby, cut it out of her, and take it. Along the way, it's very bloody. It's horribly disgusting. Sarah ends up actually killing her own mother because she thinks it's the femme that's trying to break into, or she's locked in the bathroom, and then she actually kills her own mother thinking it's the female. And I think correct me if I'm wrong, the big thing is that there was a car accident beforehand, and Sarah ended up crashing into the female, and the female lost her own baby. So that's why she feels like she has to take Sarah's baby from her and keep it. And the end of the film actually ends with the female succeeding, cutting open Sarah's stomach and taking the baby. But I'm pretty sure the baby dies too. Does it? Unclear?
I don't think it's clear. Yeah.
Unclear. Because I think you just see her and there's blood everywhere and she's just holding the baby.
Yeah.
Is that the gist? Nothing else
That's
happens.
the gist.
But you do find out as well, through photographs that Sarah kind of has, that the female has been watching her for a long time and like following her, and then the car accident is the revelation on why she's actually trying to get a hold of Sarah.
So this was my first time watching this movie, and I kind of went into it with, you know, big expectations on what I would see, and I think I really enjoyed it at the beginning. I think the part that I'm having a hard time with about this movie, and maybe why I don't like it very much, is because they gave a motive. I think it would have been infinitely more creepy, and I was like, new fear unlocked. You know, this lady's trying to break in and steal my baby out of my own, like, womb. New fear unlocked for sure. But, like, I feel like if they had just left it at this random lady trying to break in and take your baby, that would have been infinitely better in my mind than trying to rationalize the fact of, oh, this is just a revenge plot. And I was like, you know, like, I can kind of understand why she would go after her. So I guess I was just kind of, like, disappointed in the fact of, like, I felt like giving a motive kind of rationalized her actions in a way. And then I was like, oh, well, you know, I can empathize with both characters then, you know? Because Sarah, was driving the car. She was pregnant, and she was with her husband or boyfriend who was killed in the car accident too, right? So there's a lot of grief, and there's a lot of revenge, and, you know, a lot of trauma that surrounded this one car accident. So I guess my only point why I didn't like the movie maybe as much as you thought I would is just because I thought the motive was a little bit of a cop-out.
That's fair, and I can see that happening. When I watched the film, actually, like, maybe, like, 2 weeks before I watched the film, I had actually read a news article that, I don't know where this happened. I think it happened in the States, let's be real. I'm pretty sure it happened somewhere in the States, where this lady posted on either Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace or something that, to come pick up some baby clothes. Have you ever heard this story?
Maybe.
And this lady came to pick up these baby clothes and made a friend out of this woman who was posting on Facebook, like, trying to get rid of, like, items. And they got really friendly. And one day when the lady came over again to pick up something else, she actually held her there and tried to cut the baby out of her stomach.
Oh, really?
And then the motive for that was that this lady had lost her own baby.
Right.
So that's kind of why, but I was like, ew, that's kind of creepy. And knowing the fact that A l'Intérieur was not written by that time, and I hadn't really heard anybody trying to cut open somebody else's stomach before then, I was like, that's kind of weird timing.
Kind of actually similar to that. My PhD supervisor, she used to work at the women's prison here in Ontario, and she was telling us that there was a lady that was convicted. She had created a whole industry on doing, like, photography for babies, and it was all just a ploy, essentially, to get a young couple in so she could take photos of the baby, because she told her mom that she was pregnant, and she just straight up kidnapped this, like, very new kid and, you know, brought her home and was like, yep, this is mine, I birthed her, and, like, it was a whole thing, and obviously she got charged and thrown in prison and whatnot, but, you know, not as extreme as obviously having a baby cut out of you, but the fact that there's that sort of mentality of, oh, I want a baby so bad, I'll just get one, is absolutely insane.
Crazy. It's crazy. Another thing about this film too is you have to remember, so this actually got, like, critically acclaimed when it came out, particularly in the States. So I don't know if they meant for this to happen, because you never know what, like, obviously when you make a film, you want it to be critically acclaimed, you want it to be enjoyed by many viewers around the world, but French extremism wasn't really made to be enjoyed from people around the world, but because it actually has a plot and a point, I feel like it was more consumable for, like, American audience, or Western audiences, I should say, it was probably acclaimed because it had a motive and a reason. So that's why it's like, this is an extremist film that happened to be big because the director chose to actually have a connection in it.
Right. Okay, and that makes sense to me. So this is my first time, I think, watching a French extremist film, so I didn't know what to expect, but I knew it was kind of more on the like high art, intellectual side of things, you know, with like, kind of like a low budget and like more like that body or like that culture of like horror, that horror element, that old school horror with the gore and the slashing and all that. But yeah, I think if it was a little bit more, you know, ambiguous in the end, I think I would have liked it more, but I can absolutely understand that not everyone is the same in terms of liking those more ambiguous type movies or endings, or, you know, having this undercurrent of theme running through that are 100% going to go through most people's head or go over most people's heads. That's my genre. That's what I prefer.
Yeah, and if anybody is interested in extremist films, I think A l'Intérieur is a good place to start to get used to like the avant-garde cinematography maybe. Then my recommendation would go Frontiers, then Martyrs. If you want an ambiguous ending, we will definitely do Martyrs one day. And then going back to that first film that I watched, I don't know what it's actually translated to.
What's it called?
It's like, in English, it's like something like Fat Girl or something.
Okay.
I don't really know. I have to actually go back into my like university notes and find the name.
Right.
But it's essentially, really quickly, about this family and two siblings, an older and a younger, and the older sibling is beautiful and she has everything and she has a boyfriend, and the younger sibling is like chubby and has a lot of self-esteem issues, and she just like, all she wants is to be like touched and like loved like her sister. And at the end of the film, she actually like, she wants it so badly that they get into an accident, and the person that was driving the other truck comes and he rapes her, and she like likes it, like she wanted it to happen.
Oh boy.
Just to like, it's crazy. It's like changes your life. But like
that's kind of similar actually to Gone to See the Riverman, actually. Yeah. Sorry, no, we're not doing book recommendations yet. Read the second one.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But yeah, so there's levels to French extremism, which is why I think this is kind of like
lower-ish tier. Yeah.
Like, we're just like touching French extremism.
Like B tier.
Yeah, like I would say Raw, if anyone saw that.
The cannibal one? I haven't seen it, but...
I would say that's probably on par with A l'Intérieur.
Gotcha. Okay.
Anyway, wow, let's actually talk about analysis.
Yeah, literally. I only really had probably one or two main themes that I pinpointed in the movie. The one on violation of space and privacy. And this one kind of goes with, you know, it's called l'interieur, inside, for a reason. You're juxtaposing the outside to the inside of the house, right? And there's aspects of safety involved there. You know, the girl, La Femme, seems a little bit more, you know, manageable when she's outside the house, but as soon as she's inside the house, yeah, that's kind of when all hell breaks loose. But also, like, violation of space in terms of, you know, this lady's breaking in to cut a baby out of you, right? Like, what is more personal and what is more of a violation than your body being violated? And I know that, you know, doing more research on French extremist cinema talks a lot about body and body being an object. So we can definitely get into that a little bit more. But I think that was kind of like the main point that I took away was, you know, kind of how those lines get blurred of the violation of space and privacy in your personal life, and how violated you would feel in those sort of circumstances.
Oh yeah, and I mean, the majority of the film, minus the very first part and the flashback to the car scene, I believe the rest of it takes place in the comfort of Sarah's house, which is definitely something to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like, in terms of the research that I found, There's a really interesting quote here that I'll say, and this kind of talks again about giving more context to what French extremist cinema is trying to do here. So women's bodies appear degraded, powerless, and assaulted. While this superficially implies misogynist degradation, I contend that imagery is not best analyzed as violence towards women, but either as an ideological construction of violence through women's monstrous, abject bodies, wielded as patriarchal tools in service of metaphysical enlightenment. What that means, basically, in layman's terms, is the fact that there's regulations or kind of an imposition of women's bodies by more like societal constructs or societal systems, and how women's bodies tend to be a site that's contested, right? For if we're rationalizing what we're doing to women or women's bodies or putting them through or using religion or philosophy to kind of dictate what's right or wrong or how we should control or regulate, specifically what women's bodies are capable of or able to do.
Yes, I totally agree. And something that French extremist cinema does really well is subverting tropes, subverting our expected tropes. And one of them is the role of the woman in cinema. Which brings me to the famous trope that we always talk about in horror movies, and that is the final girl trope. I would say that is the trope that is subverted the most within this film.
True.
For anyone that doesn't know the final girl trope, it started from Carol Clover, and she wrote a novel called Man, Woman in Chainsaws, Gender in the Modern Horror Film. Basically, the definition of the final girl is that the female virgin protagonist goes up against the ultimate embodiment of evil, which usually exists in the physical form of a male or male-presenting thing, and then she conquers the killer against all odds. Us as the audience are left rooting for the female because we kind of connect with that innocence. And then everyone rejoices when she kills the monster. But in new French extremity films, particularly in this film challenges this notion of the final girl by subverting the role of the main female protagonist, making audiences reflect on the extreme violence that is so often eroticized, especially like the female body in popular culture, causing audiences to actually seek relief in the female's eventual demise.
Interesting.
I also said here, I'm quoting myself, by the way, that's so crazy.
I love when I do that, yeah.
There was this word, neutering the female form, and essentially that is what happens to Sarah.
Right.
She is literally neutered.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, the eventual deaths of our protagonists are embraced by audiences as they seek relief from the horrific on-screen events, ultimately subverting the notion of the final girl by rendering them victims rather than heroes.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm familiar with the final girl trope because I've also written a paper on that too in my undergrad. I think I've read the original work there too because that sounds so familiar. Do you know when that was published? The book? Women in Chainsaws?
I think I have 1992.
Yeah, I think I for sure quoted that as well in my paper. Super interesting read though, for sure. Something I would add, I guess, to that whole neutering of the female point you were making, and again, in the research that I came across too, because we're playing into those more patriarchal roles, right? Like it's usually the pretty final girl who, overcame all the odds of, killing the killer. But they're often portraying women as powerless and subservient and immaterial. Right? So again, in stark contrast with these French extremist movies, they're trying to kind of put the power back into the female's hands of awareness and self-knowing and internal power, but they're at odds with themselves, or in this case, La Femme, right? Who is kind of like, I guess, in a sense, a mirror image of herself. What if she was the one that died in the car accident, right, and lost the baby? You know, everyone's path's a little bit different, but again, when we're talking about grief and revenge and that sort of that journey that she can go on as well, we're looking at the female form, and in her case, it's not neutered, but it is disfigured.
Right, and that's what I love about them not calling or not giving a name to the femme. Like, she's just a female, and that in itself can have so many interpretations if you read it into it on different lenses. Who is the femme? Well, could you argue that the femme is Sarah? Because you could.
True, yeah,
you could,
for sure.
right? If you look at it from a philosophical way, and
yeah.
If you read into it a little bit differently, then the whole kind of message of the film changes.
For sure. I think I was coming at it from like the more regulation of women's bodies type, right? Because you see a pregnant female and you immediately assume like vulnerable person, right?
Right.
So like this is the person that needs to be protected at all costs. But in stark contrast to society, for example, and I know that, you know, we're not going to get too political here, but just from what I know with what's going on in the news media of the regulation of reproductive and health rights, women's bodies in the States, they overturned Roe v. Wade, and now there's legislation in Alabama that's basically saying that embryos have the same rights as birthed children. Hugely problematic, right? Because where does that stand in terms of in vitro fertilization treatments or fertility treatments? When you're disposing of embryos that, you know, are damaged or not used or, you know, whatever have you, and I'm not an expert on IVF, but if we're looking at if the female's body, the creator of life, the grower of life, is supposed to be this like sacred thing, if the birth of a child is supposed to be the sacred thing, then why are we regulating who can and can't have kids?
Right.
Or how they're conceived, or how they're birthed, right? You're gonna cut women open and just let them bleed to death? Which,
Yeah.
With the abortion regulations that were passed, like that is a genuine concern that some women might die during childbirth because it was not a viable pregnancy, and there is nothing stopping that procedure from taking place in certain states in America right now.
Right. You're absolutely right about that. At the end of the film, I want to talk about that like last final shots.
Okay.
When they actually show Sarah. And this is what's really interesting about this particular film. And also a little bit of Martyrs. I won't talk about Martyrs, but there's the ending of the two films are very similar in what they actually do to the female form. Cinematic style is already avant-garde. You have like, you know, the blacks and the reds, the red scale cinema and color palette. Then you get this image of Sarah on the stairs. And what I love about it is that you can't recognize her. The red of the red hues of the scene with all that blood, can you look at that and say that is a female form? Once that baby is taken out of her, it's almost like all of her femininity is gone.
Right.
Which is so interesting. And that scene there, it's literally just left a disfigured thing. And as a female and an audience member, I saw that and I was rooting for her, you know? You're like, okay, maybe she'll get it. And then when you see that final image, my connection to her was gone. It was broken. I no longer see a female that I was rooting for. I just see a disfigured being.
Right.
And that connection is gone.
Right, yeah. I don't know if I had the same reaction. Again, I kind of, as soon as that motive was revealed to me, I was like, tuning out, sorry. But yeah, I understand though the detachment though. Like, you kind of, it's not a loss of empathy, it's just more of maybe a loss to the characters because you can't really see yourself in those sorts of scenes, or you can't really see yourself in these sorts of circumstances. And I mean, like, in terms of gore factor, maybe this is bad to say, it wasn't more gory or less gory than things that I've normally seen, so I wasn't like super surprised about that. Was it well done? For sure, yeah, but I can imagine for people that don't like gory films, it was definitely gorier.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It might be like the next step up, and then, like, you're right. I wouldn't say it's less gory than an Eli Roth film.
True. I mean, we
Right.
also did watch all of the Terrifiers so far together.
Which is also true. And that's what I was going to say, because you reminded me of the Terrifier. The Terrifier actually, the first one is technically within the realm of New Extremism.
Okay, yeah, that would make sense.
And look what it also does to the female figure. You saw
Yeah.
the second Terrifier film.
Yeah.
The black-haired girl, I forget her name, that was wearing the skeleton costume at the first one. And the second one, she's horribly disfigured to the point where you can't even recognize her as like the original female body that you're rooting for. So I really like that the Terrifier actually pays homage to a lot of French extremist forms of like the woman figure.
I had no idea. Yeah, that makes sense though, now that you pointed out that it is a French extremist horror film. And yeah, even in the first Terrifier, like the girl gets sawn in half. Like,
Yeah.
you know, gory for sure, jarring absolutely. But yeah, okay, fair enough. I take your point.
I just find it interesting because like a lot of people will say Terrifier is just like a new wave of slasher, but by saying a new wave, you are literally saying yes, it is new wave extremism. Mm-hmm. That's what it is.
I'm wondering though if it's new wave because, and again, we're kind of guilty of this ourselves, it's just the normalization of violence, and especially violence against women in these sorts of movies. Like, women, you know, are portrayed as, like I said, powerless, subservient, immaterial. So what is more terrifying, especially as a woman watching a horror movie, watching another woman get, you know, attacked in such a vicious and brutal way? So
yeah.
We've just become so immune, I guess, to the horror and the gore and the quite atrocious nature, truly, that they just have to keep upping the ante. So what's next? Well, we're gonna dig an almost, you know, birthed child out of your uterus.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I think people forget this too. Like, I think it's crazy. I almost think that we're having like a resurgence of what was happening in the 70s.
Okay.
70s films. That's like,
Like in what way?
okay, well I can start with like I Spit on Your Grave.
Okay.
The original. Have you seen the original?
I haven't seen the original.
So that was, I Spit on Your Grave was the film that I wrote as my like final end all thesis. It features the longest rape scene in cinematic history up to that point. I think there's probably been longer now.
Yeah.
But it's basically this young girl is raped, and then she exacts her revenge on these guys in like really gruesome ways for the 70s. Mm-hmm. But that film, that was like basically a call to, it was basically made because the director helped a victim of rape, brought her to the police station, and instead of the police helping her, they basically said, "What do you want us to do about it?" And she was like badly beaten. He like debated, should I take her to the hospital or to the police? And he thought the police is gonna help her, and they didn't.
Actually, that's a really good point. Actually, so I was going through the comments. I watched À l'intérieur on just, you type it in Google and you can pull it up. It's actually really accessible to find. But it was something like disgusting horror films or disgustingfilms.com, something like that. Don't quote me on that. But I was going through the comments after I watched the movie, and it was actually quite funny to me. The number of 1 and 2 star comments that were basically like, that's not accurate, that's not how the police would act in these sort of circumstances. And I'm like, Okay, that's an interesting take, because in À l'intérieur, the movie, she calls the police about this woman that's stalking her and who's standing outside her house. They come, they do a quick check, they check on her. They don't really check the house, they kind of take a brief statement and then they leave. And they say there's patrol cars going to be coming by, whatever. And then, she gets attacked by this woman, she's locked in the house, and a police car stops by to do a check, and 2 officers go inside who are eventually killed, and then the other officer and the guy he's got arrested in the back of the car eventually also go into the house, and they're also killed. But it was actually just really interesting to me to see all these comments say the police wouldn't do that. They're far more resourceful. They would absolutely know how to handle this situation, right? They would know what to do, what's right and wrong. They would be prepared. They'd call for backup. And I'm like, wow, like, again, no hate to the police, but the way that people kind of make them out to be heroes, right? Or like inflate their capabilities or inflate their abilities. It's well documented that especially Indigenous women in Canada are forgotten about by police and reporting statistics, and their deaths are not even like taken seriously or looked into seriously, that sort of thing. So hearing you say that, right, the fact that this movie is kind of like, oh well, the police, we tried,
And that's the thing, and that movie, so that started what I was saying, like the wave of extremism, as this one I wanted to look up too, in the 70s, and that's where you actually got your Cannibal Holocaust and all of those movies that kind of, all the cannibalism movies that came with it. And then in Italy also had, well, because Cannibal Holocaust, Salo, or the 120 Days of Sodom. I don't know if you've ever heard of that film.
No, I haven't.
It is the most disgusting film I've ever seen. Very, very close to a Serbian film.
Okay, fair enough.
But that was about a commentary on like the fascist regime, and they take all these young boys and they do horrible, horrible things with them. But if the 70s, I feel like the movies that I've seen, at least, were almost worse than what we're seeing on stream now. That's being called this like new wave of extremism. It's extreme, it's gory, but oh my god, if you look at the films from the 70s, that I would say would be classified as new extremism.
Right, fair enough. That's interesting though, right? Because I always feel like looking back at things, people are like, oh, what was the first R-rated movie you saw? And you're like, okay, but like an R movie back in the day, converted to today's time, you would feel that like an R movie, like Scream, the original, 1996, was rated R. Looking at it in today's day and age, I'd be like, okay, like maybe 14A, it's not that bad. So it's interesting that it's kind of the reverse in this sort of circumstance.
Oh yeah, and you think about like, a lot of people I think have the mentality of, because it's older, it's not gonna pack the same punch, it's not gonna be as, but I think, thinking back on how many films I've seen, including within the realm of new extremism, I think that films from the 70s are worse. Arguably, probably the worst. I think directors actually found their voice. There's a lot of political unrest then as well, coming out of all of the disasters of the world, and then basically every country was like, I have an idea.
For sure. Well, I mean, yeah, pulling from the war, especially World War II, right, and the experiments that they were doing, and then the Cold War, the race against, like, espionage. Yeah, like, they're pulling from all of those sorts of lived experiences. What is the worst case scenario? Let's put that on the screen.
Oh, yeah. I don't remember when Men Behind the Sun was made. That's an Asian film.
Oh, I saw you watching that.
I got it. 1 second. Let's see when that was made. Really quick to prove the point.
Well, it was black and white, so I'm imagining it was probably in the 30s or 40s.
It was after World War II.
Was it?
Yeah, because it was about the Japanese doing experiments.
Right.
1988.
88. Oh, there's no way I would have guessed that.
1988 Hong Kong historical exploitation film.
Wow.
Which is crazy. That one, there's a scene where they actually use a real corpse.
Oh wow.
It's that one's crazy. But it's like 1988.
Yeah.
a lot of, like, even in this film here, it's all practical effects, it's all CGI. You can watch the gore and say, how is this different from a video game, really?
Truly, yeah.
I think the extremism part is really the what you take from it.
Yeah.
And the way that they show the female and the way they talk about it. But what's more extreme than actually using real life corpses in your films?
Absolutely. I know. And actually talking about real life, I don't know if you want to get into book recommendations. But
Let's do it.
book recommendations for all my non-fiction girlies. There's actually a book, unfortunately, that is very similar to this. It's a true story. It's called Searching for Savannah, The Murder of One Native American Woman and the Violence Against Many. It's by Gable. It was published in 2023. This is a true story, again, it happened in the States, of an indigenous woman who was basically went missing not too long before she was supposed to give birth. I want to say like maybe a month before she was supposed to give birth. Turns out it was her upstairs neighbors that lured her into their apartment after her neighbor, the female, said that she's been pregnant for about 8 months at that time and was telling her boyfriend that she was pregnant, and then killed Savannah and cut the baby out of her womb and then had her boyfriend dispose of her body in the river. And the book fortunately isn't graphic, but it does go into detail about, you know, the backstory about these two neighbors and the fact that this was an indigenous woman that this happened to. And usually, like I said, in most cases, the police aren't really quick to respond in times where it's an indigenous woman as the victim, but they were really quick to respond because there was so much pressure from Savannah's family to find her because she was 8 months pregnant at the time. So unfortunately she did pass away, but she did have the baby was found to be healthy and happy and was reunited with Savannah's boyfriend, who was the father, and was able to be raised in a positive way. But absolutely insane that is real life.
I know. That's why I'm like, what's so extreme about this film?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, obviously when it was made, sure, it's a new concept, it's crazy, it's gory, blah blah blah. What's so different about real life? This is happening. That's the craziest part.
Yeah. And sorry, I don't have the book. I got it from the library. Sophia will add a photo.
Oh god. Guys, this is... wow. This one's gonna hurt.
Oh no.
Okay, so I read, I also read a lot of horror, I read a lot of splatterpunk, but there wasn't any splatterpunk books that had these themes that I have read personally, and I didn't want to recommend you something that I've never read and then went, this is trash, because I don't like that. So instead, I decided, instead of recommending you trash that I haven't read, I'm going to recommend you trash that I have read.
We love to see it.
So, oh my god, I don't even know where I'm going with this. Basically, from what I've gathered in this movie, what I've pulled as a similarity is the avant-garde nature.
Okay.
The subverting of characters, perhaps genre. Okay, this is crazy. Alright, listen. I am not, personally, a Colleen Hoover girly.
Okay. Oh no.
I live, breathe, and die for Sarah J. Maas.
Oh god, here we go.
However, I am going to recommend on my Kindle, it's opening. Okay, anyway, Verity. You can't see it, but I'm recommending it. Brought it down for nothing.
Was it actually good? Because I've seen that on like Book Talk so many times.
Here's the problem.
Okay.
It's funny.
Okay.
It's like a laughable thriller. But that's what I think makes it so weird.
Okay.
When I like, the first thing I hear is like avant-garde. Like, it's just so strange. The story's been told before, but I feel like because Colleen Hoover isn't actually a thriller writer, she's more of a romance writer. It's just such a strange combination.
It's like a dark horror. No, like a dark comedy, sorry.
Almost. It almost reads like that.
Okay.
Um,
Okay, so I probably won't like it.
no, I don't think you would like it. But I think that people that watch extremism and aren't like grossed out by it and kind of like find that everyday, it's not humor, dark, but dark extremism film is kind of funny.
After everything we said, we're not going to end on that.
What I'm trying to say is extreme cinema is avant-garde. Because Colleen Hoover is not a thriller writer, I actually think that this book ended up being kind of avant-garde.
Okay.
Nobody's trying to steal this lady's baby, but it's like almost a case of identity where basic plot is a writer is called into this house because this woman has fallen ill and she's going to finish this lady's story. And then her husband, or this lady's husband, is obviously still alive, and then they kind of like have like an attraction to each other while this woman is still upstairs, like in a coma on her deathbed. But it's also like they're both writers, and then she finds her journal and like relives a sort of life, and there's just a lot of weird stuff that goes on. But I don't know, sometimes you do think like La Femme and the mirrors of each other are like living separate lives.
Okay, fair enough.
And like I said, the way it's written, you can see it as avant-garde. It gives similar vibes.
Okay, fair enough.
Same vibes if you're open-minded. But it's Colleen Hoover, so feel free to download it illegally onto your Kindle.
We cannot stress this enough. Download illegally, you heard it here first. So, I think that wraps up À l'intérieur.
Yes, there was no fun facts today. Very sad. When we both were searching, it was just a movie that was made, and then it went well, and there were no further facts.
The one thing I will say, though, is make sure when you're typing it in, there is another movie called Inside. I found this out because when I was trying to find this movie, I have never seen this before. I was going in for the first time. I found this other movie called Inside, didn't know that it wasn't the correct one, started watching it, went, wow, this budget is really trash, the acting is quite horrible, this can't be the one Sophia is talking about, and that is in fact correct. There is a low-budget movie called Inside about a haunted house that is not good. Don't watch that one.
2007. Also, I made that mistake. It's not l'intérieur, it's à l'intérieur.
Perfect. Just to be clear here, what we're talking about today.
À l'intérieur, 2007.
We are going to do another podcast next month, and we would like to hear some feedback, right, in terms of what you want us to watch next. So I think it's my turn to pick the next movie.
Fine, you can pick the next movie.
So maybe we can do a poll. We can do a poll maybe, just to see where people want us to go and what direction we want to go in. But stay tuned. We'll be back once a month.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Spirit Box Session.
Oh, and we're on Spotify.
Oh my god, how could we forget? Yes, huge announcement. Whoa. We are on Spotify. You can now listen to us on the go.
On the go.
In the gym. In the comfort of your own house.
In the car.
In the car. Where else?
At the club.
Anywhere. Anywhere you want.
Could you imagine rolling up to the club? There's someone there like vibing on the dance floor and they're listening to a podcast about horror movies. I'd be like, yo, they know how to party.
Absolutely.
But yes, all of our previous episodes are on Spotify, or we're also on YouTube at Killjoy Studios, Sophia's channel. Yeah, feel free to support.
Yeah. Thank you so much for all your support this far. We appreciate you.